Daryl Maguire, is embroiled in an international fraud scandal. An ABC investigation has uncovered how a company that the former state MP did favours for was allegedly involved in widespread fraud in Australia and tied up in a vast scam by a Chinese business partner. Mr Maguire told Gladys Berejiklian about some of his dealings for the Australian company in calls intercepted by the state's corruption watchdog, and she's under renewed pressure to answer questions about what she knew. This exclusive story from ABC Investigations' Sean Rubenstein-Donlop and Echo Hoy. And a warning, it contains language some viewers may find offensive.
On the outskirts of Tamworth in regional New South Wales, a historic cattle station has become the scene of a devastating international fraud.
With the amount of money, the amount of greed, lust, corruption, power, this has got underbelly written all over it.
7:30 has uncovered a scam centred on this vast farm called Currabubula Station and a company that relied on former state MP Daryl Maguire.
He got things done when others couldn't, but it was outside of his electorate.
Did you make money out of this, Mr Maguire?
Will you apologise to the public?
Daryl Maguire is the target of an explosive corruption investigation which last year revealed his secret long-term relationship with the Premier.
Mr Maguire was a colleague of 15 years. He was someone that I trusted, and that developed into a close personal relationship. Yep.
What did Gladys Berejiklian know about your business dealings?
The inquiry by the Independent Commission Against Corruption, or ICAC, exposed how the member for Wagga Wagga wheeled and dealed for a network of Chinese-born business figures. One of them was an awarded farming entrepreneur called Jimmy Liu, whose business has left a trail of destruction across Australia.
Mr Maguire, over the years, has provided assistance to your company, is that right?
I help a lot.
Daryl Maguire shared details of his dealings with Mr Liu in tapped calls with Gladys Berejiklian, but she didn't report the conversations.
So they've invited all these people to shake hands and suck dicks, right?
And they seem to think it's in your electorate. I didn't say anything.
Mr Maguire told the Premier he was in debt. He wanted a job with Jimmy Liu after politics.
I'm poor, I'm telling you, 1.59 million, Paul. Just repeat after me, 1.5 million.
I'm not going to say any such thing.
Anyway, I'll tell you tonight, Jimmy made me an offer.
All right, well, you stay away, please.
Maybe she is saying, stay away from Mr Liu. Maybe she's saying, stay away from me. But I've got a feeling that the Premier should be brought in and asked to try and refresh her memory, because we need to know how much at the top level of New South Wales politics was known.
Jimmy Liu's company, United World Enterprises, or UWE, reaped riches from the Chinese trade boom as a middleman for Australian farmers.
Looking forward to see you, mate.
His former general manager, Stephen Foote, is speaking out to accuse UWE of widespread fraud against investors and taxpayers. He says the company falsified claims to the tax office and promised investors impossible gains.
They were essentially chefs. They were cooking the books. UWE essentially was just a Ponzi scheme.
Internal records obtained by 7:30 also reveal a company run by Daryl Maguire, Gateway International, was on UWE's books as a supplier. Gateway International promised to sell influence and experience that would reach to the highest levels of government.
My name's Jimmy Liu.
At the ICAC inquiry, Mr Liu insisted his only payments to Mr Maguire were a $1,400 cheque and a trip to China.
Yes.
By 2017, Jimmy Liu was deep in debt, and he found new business partners at an aged care company in China. As it turned out, that company was running an elaborate scam, and it wanted government support in New South Wales.
The company, called Haichan, promised grand retirement villages and aged care resorts across China. Haichan convinced hundreds of pensioners to invest in projects that never existed and took them on tours of facilities it didn't own, hounding them for more money month by month.
We always stay true to our vision. Take from society and give back to all human beings.
In May 2017, Jimmy Liu asked Daryl Maguire to arrange an official ceremony in Parliament House for a deal with Haichan for an Australian expansion. Government figures came to witness the signing of the deal for Haichan's first international resort on Mr Liu's farm, Currabubula Station.
It was going to be essentially developed to place cottages or villas where essential people or retirees from China could come and stay on the property.
In China, Haichan launched a promotional blitz, claiming it was going global with Australian government backing.
Daryl
Maguire's role was instrumental. It was using his political office, his political position, and actually the facilities of the Parliament itself to give some credibility to the whole of the project, which it otherwise wouldn't have.
In Shanghai, retiree Liu Jinghui sold her home and gave $800,000 to Haichan, convinced the scheme had government approval in Australia.
This Australian MP, I want to say to him, because of your actions, so many old people have lost their homes. You have caused economic loss.
Many of Haichan's victims now have no money for healthcare. Some have died. 84-year-old Tang Longhai couldn't support his wife and lost his son to cancer.
What happened to me was really sad. My son died and my wife died because of this.
According to Chinese court documents obtained by 7:30, Haichan defrauded more than 900 victims of at least $46 million. The victims believe the true figure is up to 3 times higher. At least 16 staff at Haichan have been jailed over the fraud, but the 2 executives who ran the con and signed the deal with Jimmy Liu are still free. The stolen money has never been found.
We now suspect they took the money to Australia. The money should be brought back and given back to these people who were ripped off.
As the scam was unravelling in 2018, Stephen Foote discovered UWE was receiving millions of dollars in unexplained transfers. It's not known whether the payments were connected to the Haichan deal.
I literally have no idea where the money came from because we were insolvent. The response that I was given was that it's come from China.
This year, UWE went into administration and Jimmy Liu was declared bankrupt, owing at least $15 million. The ABC hasn't seen evidence that Mr Maguire knowingly assisted any fraud or that he or Mr Liu knew Haichan was running a scam. They didn't respond to 7:30's questions. The ICAC heard Mr Maguire spoke of UWE or Mr Liu in at least 7 calls with the Premier. She also declined to answer 7:30's questions, but last year denied knowing what UWE was.
If I understood that anything wrong was going to take place, of course I would have taken action, but can I make clear I had no idea what UWE meant?
Obviously, ICAC has got to reopen the matter and ask some further questions of Mr Maguire, and I also believe the Premier. It seems to have led to no action or prosecution of people here in Australia. The relevant police authorities must look immediately to see whether or not there's been anything of a criminal nature here.
Now to Sydney's worst-kept secret overnight that became official today. Another month of lockdown as case numbers continue to rise. But what New South Wales has also declared today is that it will persist and go further with a highly targeted, varied and nuanced series of measures in different communities within a massive city. The question is, what sort of social and political fallout will be from such an approach? 4.5 weeks down, 4 to go.
All Greater Sydney will be in lockdown for a further 4 weeks till the 28th of August.
Ever since the outbreak began, there have been calls for the whole of Sydney to have a tougher lockdown. Restrictions have now been tightened, but they're not citywide. Residents from another 3 local government areas are now forbidden from leaving for work unless they're an authorised worker. Aged care and healthcare workers in Cumberland and Fairfield, and all workers living in Canterbury Bankstown will need to test every 72 hours if leaving the area for work.
That localised, targeted response is what we hope will have the desired effect.
I think what the government is doing in New South Wales is quite reasonable. Testing people who are leaving their restricted LGAs, workers, essential workers, testing them every 3 days for COVID is a very good idea, and it's something we haven't really seen, say, during the Victorian outbreak last year.
In addition to those extra restrictions, the Premier announced that compliance would be beefed up.
I think the real thing that's going to make a difference is lockdown and keeping people apart from each other and making sure that people are not infectious when they're out and about. So I think an extension of the lockdown and making it more stringent is appropriate.
Other measures announced today: construction will resume, although not in restricted council areas. Rapid antigen testing at workplaces and schools is on the way too. New South Wales has made it clear today that it's not looking to the past for its strategy out of this outbreak, rejecting calls to adopt measures like curfews and outdoor masks that Melbourne used last year. Instead, it is looking to vaccines.
We know lockdowns work, and we just have to hold our course. And we also know that we have other tools that we haven't had before, and those other tools are vaccination.
So although with the vaccination you do need to wait a few weeks for it to be effective, if there's an area where there's a lot of intense transmission and ongoing transmission, then targeting vaccine to that population hopefully will reduce the duration of lockdown, will reduce the duration of transmission and disease in that population, and it might also reduce the peak disease in that population.
Welcome to a very unusual...
HSC students will return to school on the 16th of August. The state will redirect Pfizer shots from the regions to make sure they're vaccinated. And vaccine hubs will accept walk-ins from people of all ages for the AstraZeneca jab.
Vaccination is both a key to individual protection, but also assisting us in preventing that transmission risk. And it does take delayed 2 to 3 weeks, but the more we can see the vaccination levels rise, it will assist us in the control. But we will need the lockdown.
It isn't unreasonable to consider sending just Year 12 students back to school, so a minimal number of students.
As well as tying its freedom to a higher vaccination rate, New South Wales blamed the low vaccine rate for the extended lockdown. And it has extracted a price from the federal government for that policy failure by getting the Morrison government to expand its financial support for the state, a move that conspicuously wasn't announced until Victoria and South Australia started to come out of lockdown.
Over the course of the last several days, indeed up to a week, the federal government has been working on a program of additional support that may have been required should Sydney have gone into a further lockdown.
There's not much to be cheerful about right now. There's the crushing monotony of lockdown, the stubborn rise in case numbers, and the devastating impact on small businesses. But Gladys Berejiklian says there is cause for optimism.
Spring does provide a period of hope. We have seen in the last few days vaccination rates with the AstraZeneca go through the roof.
The challenge is steep though. There were at least 68 people in the community while infectious, while another 64 are under investigation. The goal, for now, is to get that to zero.
Is it possible to get there after 4 weeks?
Well, look, that's obviously our intention, but we've seen how we've struggled to reduce that number of infectious in the community, and that is apparent. But if we want to live freely, whilst vaccination rates remain rather low, that is the one target we need to stick to.
And I think for the people of New South Wales and Australia who are looking on, we have to think of places like Taiwan. So Taiwan has had an outbreak since May 15th or so, which has been addressed with a lot of restrictions, not a lockdown. and they're now down to very small numbers of cases. So there certainly is hope that we can get this outbreak under control.
Sydney's extended lockdown has forced the federal government to again adjust its economic support payments. For many workers, the amount of money will now be the same as the old JobKeeper wage subsidy. But for businesses and workers, the design of the new system is fundamentally different, as Dan Conifer reports.
How's it going?
Good.
Here's your filming stuff.
Thank you.
How's your voice holding up?
Oh, I'm sick of Zoom, I'll tell you that much.
Okay, take care.
Anne-Marie Jones's Pilates business has now been closed for a month.
Very stressed. I'm not sleeping. I am very, very, very stressed.
Turnover is down an estimated 98%.
Hey guys, how you going?
Her team is holding some classes online, but that isn't enough.
And exhale, belly buttons tapped.
There's no money left. 5 weeks of no money coming in. I mean, we've had a couple of $100 here and there from some random Zoom classes.
Back to centre.
Anne-Marie has applied for help through several government schemes announced over recent weeks, but she's seen nothing in her accounts yet. She's still paying her 15 staff members.
I'm paying them out of our personal savings. So if we don't get help from the government, our personal savings are gone.
We're going to tilt.
So I keep asking them the question, how can we pay our wages when for 5 weeks, nearly 6 weeks, we have had absolutely zilch in the way of income, but our overheads haven't gone down. So get us money now. Get money into our bank accounts like you did last year. Can you show me those projections and what...
She applied for the Job Saver program yesterday, the new scheme designed to keep businesses like hers alive.
The Job Saver, I put my application in yesterday. It cannot be processed until I'm approved for the initial $15,000 grant, one-off grant.
The priority is to ensure we're there to support those who need that help. Whoever wants to take the credit for this payment, knock yourself out.
The federal and New South Wales governments today announced the Job Saver program, which they unveiled just earlier this month, would help more businesses and increase the maximum payments they could receive.
We will ensure through our financial support, as the situation evolves, always there to keep people in work and businesses in business.
The new program is trying to achieve the same outcomes as JobKeeper, but in a different way. For most businesses, Job Saver requires the same decline in turnover as JobKeeper did, 30%. Under the new program, only businesses with annual revenue of up to $250 million qualify. Those businesses will get a payment equivalent to 40% of their New South Wales wages bill, limited to no more than $100,000 a week if they agree to keep their employees on the books. Unlike JobKeeper, there's no specific requirement the money must be passed on to employees, while workers who've lost hours can apply for an emergency payment, today increased to a maximum of $750 via Centrelink.
It's not enough. The JobKeeper worked.
Calls for a scheme that looks more like the original JobKeeper have only increased throughout the New South Wales crisis, from both sides of politics.
JobKeeper has proven to be successful in keeping businesses in business and workers connected to their job.
If the circumstances are the same as when JobKeeper was operating last year, why is it that the support is less?
Companies already have it all set up for JobKeeper. They know how it works.
And focus on the problems that are in front of us.
The federal government for days has insisted a return to JobKeeper is not happening.
Why not reintroduce JobKeeper?
Because it's not the right solution for the problems we have now. When we did JobKeeper, we had to employ it across the whole country, all at once, and we did it for 6 months. What we need now is the focused effort on where the need is right now. And so it can be turned on and off.
A large part of the JobKeeper money went to businesses that didn't have any revenue fall at all. And another part of that JobKeeper money went to many workers whose jobs were never in doubt. So JobKeeper was a great program, but it had 2 key flaws that it's important to improve on this time.
Economist Andrew Charlton advised the former Labor government during the global financial crisis. He says the latest banking data shows spending has fallen by about half as much as last year's lockdowns.
We're seeing real pain in the small business sector. Many small businesses just don't have the headroom to support their workers when there aren't customers coming through the door. So that's where we're seeing the biggest loss in shifts for workers and in many cases the loss of some jobs.
26-year-old Nathan McGregor usually does gardening and landscaping for a living, working for a small business in southwestern Sydney, but now can only mow his own lawn. Nathan says this lockdown is worse than last year's.
Landscaping last year, everything was a little slow because people were worried about the virus and they were trying to hold things off. So everything slowed down a little bit, but there was still work going on.
Then he received the JobKeeper wage subsidy. This time, he's not eligible for the emergency $750 a week payment because he receives a benefit through Centrelink.
The financial hit on me personally has been pretty severe, seeing as I'm out of work and I was meant to start a new full-time job as well. And now I can't start there as well. So there's just all this potential lost income, which is just really deflating, to be honest.
People who lost work but also receive a government benefit were told their Centrelink payments would be all they'd be getting through lockdown. Until today, when the federal government announced a $200 a week top-up.
I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to question why they didn't do it sooner, but maybe they just thought that it wouldn't end up like this. I really don't know.
Business owner Anne-Marie fears the support that's been announced by governments won't be enough.
And I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Get your act together. Help us. We need your help. You talk about small business being the backbone of our economy, but you're letting us all close up shop. We're going to have no choice but to call it quits.
Victorian and South Australian parents are breathing a sigh of relief as their remote learning juggle ends today, with children returning to classrooms. But in Sydney, it's another 4 weeks for most pupils. The state government is stepping in to urgently test and vaccinate Year 12 students who have lost valuable time ahead of this year's final exams. Andy Park reports.
Another 4 weeks, another month of homeschool learning for children and parents and teachers across Greater Metropolitan Sydney and Central Coast, Blue Mountains, Shell Harbour and Wollongong, and we know what a stress that is for parents.
There's nothing like teaching the kids face-to-face and having those one-on-one conversations and providing them support when they need it individualised with them in the classroom.
This will be as close as Doonside Technology High School Vice Principal Paul Carbon gets to his students for some time yet.
Today is the opportunity for our students to come and collect work booklets. We understand that not all our students feel comfortable working online, or some of our parents don't feel comfortable working online.
Of most concern is the Delta variant's effect on young people, and particularly the Year 12 graduating class and their upcoming final exams, which have already been delayed by a week.
Especially with the HSC coming up, Year 12 trials coming up in a couple of weeks, so there's a bit of anxiety about things are a bit different, a bit unsure about how the lockdown is going to continue.
With calls from the Catholic school sector to cancel this year's HSC in favour of an average of this year's assessments, today the New South Wales Premier announced plans for rapid COVID testing for Year 12 students and the reallocation of Pfizer vaccine stocks from regional New South Wales to this year's HSC students in Sydney hotspots. It's all designed to get them back in the classroom as early as August 16th. But some students say that won't make up for lost time in their crucial final year of high school.
Remote learning in this lockdown has been pretty tough. It's been already a bit over a month in lockdown, over 2 weeks in actual school whilst in lockdown, trying to keep up with the ever-building homework and study that you have to do at school. You're basically trapped at your desk full-time.
One Doonside Year 12 student, Harrison Try, is dreaming of getting into an engineering degree next year, but for weeks he's been locked out of his metalwork class.
We've had to basically completely stop metalwork. We can't do any of the practical components.
Harrison would have preferred a cancellation of the HSC trials.
A lot of people in our school have been hoping/wishing for it to either be an average based on our prior exams and cancelled altogether, or just given more time. But as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, we really don't have that.
Also struggling to keep up, Melbourne parents Safura Alazadeh and her husband, who must juggle work and the remote learning supervision of their two boys, one with special needs.
So we have to synchronise ourselves, and if today unfortunately we've got a clash that both of us have an overlapping meeting, that's going to be interesting, because basically we need to make sure kids are supervised and both of us are going to be working, and we need to get away from each other far enough so that we don't hear each other at each other's meetings, which is quite frustrating.
She, like thousands of Victorian and South Australian parents, celebrated the return to class learning today.
Schools will open for all year levels.
It's an absolute blessing that we know kids can go back to school. I feel extremely relieved that they can go back to their normal routine, back working with their own teachers that are trained to do this, seeing their friends, and actually being more off sitting in front of the computer and doing what kids should be doing.
But the Delta variant and its transmissibility, particularly amongst young people, remains a concern. The Therapeutic Goods Administration responded by approving Pfizer for 12 to 16-year-olds. A review in conjunction with the University of London on nearly 40 studies on the prevalence and transmission of COVID-19 in schools, including some Delta variants, concluded the risk of transmission from children to adults was 40% lower than adult-to-adult transmission.
This is not a disease of teenagers, but they are the ones who've suffered on behalf of the wider public, and especially older adults, because they've had to stay home from school. It affects their long-term education and employment opportunities, and even their longevity. A better educated child lives longer.
The side effects of remote learning are already being felt by Year 12 student Harrison Try.
Having that disconnect means you don't finish as a year feeling like one connected year group with many friends and people that you've worked hard with. You just feel like you've been talking to a bunch of people on a screen.
A lot of teachers I've spoken to, based on this announcement, are very worried. They are concerned about their own health.
With a possible return to the classroom in New South Wales in coming weeks, teachers are asking for priority vaccination as frontline workers.
You would have in some schools up to 600 Year 12 students returning. That is not even counting the teachers that will be returning as well, and the number of school administration staff, counsellors, school learning and support officers, canteen staff. That's bringing a lot of young people and adults together in often very cramped spaces, corridors, crowded classrooms, crowded staff rooms.
With some states rejoicing in the return to classroom learning, albeit with indoor mask wearing in high schools, Greater Sydney faces both more remote learning and the concerns over how safe Year 12 students will be when they return.
You can tell that this is a whole completely different game to the alpha strain of 2020.
That's the program for tonight. Before we go, an update on Monday night's story about South Australia's strict approach to quarantine. The story featured an emotional interview with Sandra Williams, who is being held in hotel quarantine despite 3 negative tests. The state government has now allowed her to quarantine at home. Thanks for your company. Good night.